Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The left would very much like you to stop talking and thinking about bad decisions they've made over the years that they happen to be profiting from. Shut up, they're screaming, including to this show. Obviously, we won't, and you shouldn't either. Details in a minute. But first, 2 weeks from New Year's, and the Trump administration is trying one last time to get funding for that promised border wall on our southern border. The president says he's willing to shut down the government in order to get the first $5 billion in construction money. Over the weekend, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer promised that will never happen under any circumstances.
President Trump should understand there are not the votes for the wall in the House or the Senate. He is not going to get the wall in any form.
He is not going to get the wall. Notice the pronouns Schumer used. He, Donald Trump, cannot have his wall, says the Senate Minority Leader. But what about the rest of us, the other 325 million people who live here? Turns out we can't have a wall either. A wall is just too expensive. In fact, it's wasteful, says, and brace yourself now for an icy blast of comedy here, the Democratic Party.
I asked the people at Customs and Border Protection, what would it cost to have scanners to scan all the vehicles coming in? They said $300 million. That's a far cry from $5 billion and a much more effective way to have a secure border.
Most of us, speaking for myself, consider the wall immoral, ineffective, inexpensive.
To spend billions of dollars on an immoral, ineffective, and expensive wall.
Don't waste billions of dollars of taxpayer money in order to build something that will not make our border more secure.
Border security is enormously important, but I think building a wall is a very costly and inefficient way to do that.
Oh, so Mr. Math Guy Bernie Sanders says a border wall is, quote, very costly. Okay, how costly is it precisely? Get your calculator out. Here are the numbers. The estimated cost of a border wall is about $25 billion. It's estimated, so let's say it's twice that. That would still be a tiny fraction of the price of the pointless stalemate we're now waging in Afghanistan. That costs about $45 billion every year, not even including, of course, the vast human cost. Now compare that to the $25 billion needed to restore our national sovereignty with the wall. And yet, and this is strange, nobody in Washington seems to be upset about the price of the Afghanistan debacle. A lot of people here are getting rich from it, and maybe that's the difference. You also hear endlessly, and usually from people who live in gated communities, that walls just don't work. But if that's true, if they really don't work, then why has Congress been happy to help pay for border barriers in Jordan, Tunisia, and Israel? Nancy Pelosi says that walls are immoral, and yet for some reason she's not flying to Jerusalem to lecture the Israelis on how they're wasting U.S. aid building walls that don't work. The Israelis know how effective walls are. That's why they have them. Israel's wall on the Egyptian border almost completely halted illegal immigration from that country. In fact, by some measures, completely, not one person came over it once they made it taller. Turns out there is a limit to the height of ladders. The truth, as you know, and as usual, is precisely the opposite of what they're telling you. The left fears a border wall precisely because it would work and could keep working long after President Trump leaves office. And that is why, when pressed, invariably they fall back on their signature argument. Racism! Border walls are racist!
The president went to the heart of what I call his brown menace theory. These migrants, they're dirty people. They bring disease.
This border wall thing is about controlling the browning of America.
Donald Trump is fixated on the southern border, as he was the day that he announced this campaign. It is not about securing the borders. It is about xenophobic, racist, bigoted beliefs.
He believes, and unfortunately maybe the facts will bear this out, his base is scared of anyone who is not visibly white.
His base is scared. They always say that. They're scared, the right? They cling to things for comfort. It's just projection. Look around. Who's angry? Who's yelling? Who's hysterical? The left. Permanent Washington and their servants in the media. They're the ones who are terrified. They don't want an honest debate about immigration or a lot of other mindless policies they've been benefiting from for many years. They hate Trump for forcing a debate on any of this. They hate you for agreeing with him. Tough. We're going to talk about it anyway. Richard Goodstein is an attorney and former advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton, and he joins us tonight. So I can't get past this. Anything that Trump, any conversation Trump enters becomes about Trump. And because the media are so dumb, all the smart kids go into finance, the dumb ones go into media, they're mesmerized by that. They can't get past it, but no one's debating the actual policy of the wall, which is so interesting to me. It's too expensive? $25 billion is too expensive by the Democrats' calculation? How does that work?
Well, the fact is the Democrats in 2013 in the Senate put $40 billion into border security and got not only every single vote of Democrats in the Senate, but 14 Republicans, including lefties like Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio and Orrin Hatch. You know, as to the Israel analogy, Israel, these people who are migrants who are seeking asylum are coming from Honduras or wherever because they've seen their kids' throats slashed. People are trying to get over into Israel to slash the throats of Israeli kids. That's the distinction.
No, actually, it's not the distinction.
Well,
there are a couple.
How am I wrong?
No, I'll tell you how you're wrong, because you're talking about the wrong wall. So there's the border wall that we've debated a lot in this country, in what used to be called the occupied territories in Israel proper. There's also a wall, the southern part of the country, that separates Israel from Egypt. And over that border were coming tens of thousands of illegal immigrants from Africa. Yes, Africa. They weren't fleeing persecution, they were economic migrants, and they moved to Tel Aviv. And the people there didn't like it, the working class people didn't like it, and so they built a huge wall. And nobody in the Democratic Congress has a problem with that. It was an immigration wall to keep out Africans. But that's not immoral, because why?
Well, again, I think the fact is, like every country, and including Democrats here, we have to protect sovereignty. Okay?
But is that immoral?
But we also
and
have...
I just want to, can I just be clear? I don't want my words to be taken out of context.
Yeah.
I think it's great that Israel protected its sovereignty,
right.
And I'm not criticizing Israel in any way. But I'm not calling walls immoral. So how can you criticize our immigration wall but not Israel's immigration wall?
Well, again, I'm not saying it's immoral. I'm saying that they serve different purposes. The fact of the matter is, the Africans that came into Israel saw themselves as part of the 12 tribes, right?
No, these were from Sudan. These are not the Ethiopians. This is just it's an immigration thing. People in poor countries want to move to rich countries. I would too. I don't begrudge them that. Right. You know what I mean? Of course. I would do exactly the same as every person in that caravan, and I mean it.
Right.
But I'm not in the caravan. I'm an American. It's my country, and I want the best for my country. So what is the best for the country, and why is a wall not? I'm honestly confused.
Yeah, I think, again, Israel's besieged in the way that Americans are not. Now, I will say this. Donald Trump, to the point that all the people were making that you were deriding, he will have an other. If he gets a wall, it will be something else. It will be terrorists of this color or that color through election day of 2020.
But it's not about Trump. It's about, no. It's, you know what it's about? All this border security hasn't worked, and we have tens of millions of people living here whose names we don't know. They're using fake IDs, and they're living in our country, and it's a disaster. And so let's do something that works. That's all I'm saying.
And since I talked about this with you last week, the Washington Examiner, not a left-wing publication, said that ICE deportations were lower under Donald Trump than under Barack Obama. Okay,
then that's Trump's fault. I'm not here to defend Trump. I'm here to ask why we can't have a wall. And I don't understand. The walls work. They work in Israel. They're way less costly than a lot of other dumb things we do, including the war in Afghanistan. And Democrats are against them because why? I don't get it.
Well, the fact is, Republicans have been in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House for 2 years. Why are we December 17th and having this discussion?
All right, okay, you got me on that one. You got me on that one.
For once.
Okay, you know what? You're right, Richard Goodstein. We shouldn't be debating this a week before New Year's. It is their fault. I agree. Thank you. Well, the resistance to defending our border isn't the domain of one party, as Richard Goodstein just pointed out correctly. Chuck Schumer said so on Sunday. A faction of Republicans won't do anything to defend our southern border. Watch.
Even the House, which is a majority Republican, they don't have the votes for his $5 billion wall plan. They just have to have the guts to tell President Trump he's off on the deep end here, and all he's going to get with his temper tantrum is a shutdown. He will not get a wall.
He won't get a wall. And the truth is, nobody in Washington, I mean, literally nobody, is for the wall. And that includes virtually everyone in the federal bureaucracy, too. Voice of America, taxpayer-funded broadcaster. It's a news outlet. You'd think at least they would be willing to support border security, but no. Instead, a recent piece produced by VOA attacked the government's claim that criminals and terrorists can enter the U.S. through our border, though it's demonstrably true. In that same piece, they described the Center for Immigration Studies as a hardline anti-immigration group. The only thing that makes CIS hardline, of course, is they support decreasing immigration. By the way, so do most Americans. So do the citizens of most countries polled. Hardline, spare me. Stephen Camarada is Director of Research at Center for Immigration Studies, and he joins us tonight. Is there any hope for movement when every person in the whole city, but from Paul Ryan to Chuck Schumer, to Voice of America, Trump's own employees are against this.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Obviously, it was one of the things that made him win, and yet, when you look at it relative to other things, it isn't that big a deal to spend the money on the wall. Now, there are other things we would need to do, and yet, you know, elite opinion is just dead set against the idea for the most part. You're right, and it makes it hard for Trump to move forward.
I noticed that no activist group on the left is ever called hardline. No one's ever far left. They're always moderate, and you're hardline.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think that's done as be derogatory. But to be honest with you, I've been called worse, so I can't really say. It's pretty mild. But the bottom line is, look, as you pointed out, most Americans want our law enforced. They want immigration laws controlled, and they want, as you point out, a lower level of legal immigration. And that's all we basically argue for. Not no immigration. We just argue for enforcing the law and some reforms in our legal immigration system. That certainly doesn't make us hard line. But you're right, people will use that label in an effort to delegitimize what is really a position held by the majority of Americans.
We've been running into this problem recently. It's something you've dealt with for a long time. Have you noticed that it's almost impossible to have a rational conversation about the policy of immigration because the name-calling, the vicious name-calling, is just so intense?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Sentiment and emotion, and then you're right, just trying to use name-calling to suppress debate rather than engaging debate. There are a few on the right who do that, but it really is a left-wing phenomenon. They just prefer to impugn the motives, argue that people who'd like a more moderate pace of immigration or the laws enforced, they just say they're motivated by racial animus in order to suppress debate. It's very unfortunate, but it is what's happening.
How do we get closer to a solution if you can't even have an honest conversation about it among rational people?
That's a very fair point. Look, at CIS, my organization, the Center for Immigration Studies, we basically crunch the numbers. We mostly provide data, and we just provide basic information. And I think that's the best way to go.
I think it is. I think it is too. And I'm grateful for that. By the way, I should say, as I've said before, I have no idea what your politics are. You could be a massive Hillary voter. I don't care. I just want the numbers. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We've talked a lot on this show about the threat to free speech. It turns out it's very real. Here's one example. Last week, we interviewed a man named Genaro Lopez. Lopez is an elected official in Tijuana, Mexico. He's exactly the kind of person you'd think a lot of American journalists would want to talk to. For months, the media have demanded that the migrant caravan from Honduras must be admitted into the United States. Once it gets here, they've told us, our country will be greatly improved by its presence. That's how immigration works. Okay, it turns out we can test that hypothesis. That very same caravan, the one they've been telling you about, is now encamped in Tijuana. It's been there for weeks. Simple question, has the caravan made Tijuana better? Genaro Lopez would know the answer. His job is to represent the citizens of that city. We've invited Lopez on twice to ask about the caravan. Here's some of what he told us. It seems that somebody's cleaning up garbage. Is there a lot of trash there?
There's a lot of trash because what I was trying to tell you, the 360 grew to 6,200, and that's when it got out of hand. So we got another facility. It's a big concert hall where you can have like 10,000 people under a roof.
That was on December 3rd. 10 days later, we invited Genaro Lopez back onto the show to see how Tijuana was doing. Nobody else in the media seemed interested in what had happened to the caravan. As long as the migrants remained in Mexico, they couldn't really be used to attack Donald Trump, so the press moved on to the next dumb, shiny thing. But we were interested. Here's what Lopez told us.
Things aren't getting better. They're probably getting worse. Last weekend, we issued an ultimatum to all the Hondurans and Guatemalans that are camping out here on the street. They're blocking the street, and they're doing all their necessities, trashing the street. Problems are still going on. There's been like 280 arrests. Before it was only for drug possession and being drunk in the streets. Now it's for breaking and entering into homes.
Trashing the street, doing drugs in public, blocking traffic, breaking into homes. That's not at all what CNN promised us. Was Genaro Lopez one of those white nationalists the New York Times is always warning us about? Did he make the whole thing up, pictures and all, for his own sick, bigoted reasons? Possibly. Or maybe, and this was our conclusion, there could be a lesson here for the United States. Here's what we said that night on the show. Our country's economy is becoming more automated and tech-centered by the day. It's obvious that we need more scientists and skilled engineers, but that's not what we're getting. Instead, we're getting waves of people with high school educations or less. Nice people, no one doubts that, but as an economic matter, this is insane. It's indefensible, so nobody even tries to defend it. Instead, our leaders demand that you shut up and accept this. We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided. In a fast-evolving economy, it could be preferable to import more engineers and fewer people with low skills, no matter how nice or well-meaning those people might be, and we always assume they are. That's what we said. That was our claim, and it's hard to argue with that. In fact, nobody on the left did argue with it. They ignored it. Instead, they zeroed in on the last line. The left says we have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, even if it makes our own country more like Tijuana is now, which is to say poorer and dirtier and more divided. That's what we said. It's true. Ask Genaro Lopez. Thanks to the efforts of the American left, he and his city are living with the consequences. But precisely because it is so obviously true, saying it out loud is a threat. Our immigration policy exists for the profit and the comfort of a relatively tiny number of people. Everybody else gets shafted, including Genaro Lopez and an awful lot of people just like him. Meanwhile, the people profiting from the policy don't want the rest of us to think about it too much. They want us just to mouth the empty platitudes and move on. Nothing to see here. Shut up and go away. Those who won't shut up get silenced. You've seen it a million times. It happens all the time. The enforcers scream, "Racist!" on Twitter until everybody gets intimidated and changes the subject to the Russia investigation or some other distraction. It's a tactic, a well-worn one. Nobody thinks it's real. And it won't work with this show. We're not intimidated. We plan to try to say what's true until the last day. And the truth is, unregulated mass immigration has badly hurt this country's natural landscape. Take a trip to our southwestern deserts if you don't believe it. Thanks to illegal immigration, huge swaths of the region are covered with garbage and waste that degrade the soil and kill wildlife. The Arizona Department of Environment Quality estimates that each illegal border crosser leaves 6 to 8 pounds of trash during the journey into our country. If you're interested in more detail, look at the website they've created. It's called Arizona Border Trash. It's dedicated to highlighting and cleaning up the thousands of tons of garbage strewn across Arizona by illegal immigrants every year. Illegal immigration comes at a huge cost to our environment. The Government Accountability Office, GAO, put it this way, quote, "Illegal border activity on federal lands not only threatens people, but endangered species and the land itself. Illegal aliens and smugglers have destroyed cactus and other sensitive vegetation that can take decades to recover, including habitat for endangered species." One land management official described another federal property on Arizona's border as so unsafe and with resources so destroyed that it is now primarily used for illegal activities and no longer visited by the general public, end quote. Now, keep in mind, that's not a press release from Donald Trump's campaign team. That's a federal study from 2002. That was back when people could do science without getting fired for it. The left used to care about the environment, the land, the water, the animals. They understood that America is beautiful because it is open and uncrowded. Not so long ago, environmentalists opposed mass immigration. They knew what the costs were. They still know, but they don't care. We do care, and we're going to continue telling you about it. We think you have a right to know, no matter what they say. Well, at the same time, the press barks about Russia. More and more American companies are binding themselves to China's fascist regime. Kind of amazing how that works. We've got details after the break. There's some news tonight in the Mueller investigation. Russia, Jim Comey, and the prosecution/persecution of former General Michael Flynn. Trace Gallagher joins us tonight to wrap up all of it. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, this marks the second time in 8 days that former FBI Director James Comey has publicly slammed President Trump after testifying before a House panel concerning the 2016 investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. Comey says he felt compelled to talk to journalists about the rule of law. And President Trump tweeting that his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, is a rat. Watch.
This is the President of the United States calling a witness who has cooperated with his own Justice Department a rat. Say that again to yourself at home and remind yourself where we have ended up.
Comey also lashed out at GOP lawmakers, saying they should not be cowed by their base and Fox News and should speak the truth, though he did not lay out what truth they should speak. And Comey's GOP attack comes a day after California Congressman Darrell Issa and Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani lambasted Comey for his handling of the 2017 interview of then National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Comey admitted last week he broke protocol because he, quote, could get away with it, when he sent 2 FBI agents to the White House in January 2017 to interview Flynn without going through the process. Flynn did not have a lawyer, was not told that false statements in that setting could constitute a crime. Watch.
And I would not be surprised a bit that the conviction of Flynn is overturned because of the Justice Department and the FBI's misconduct.
What they did to General Flynn should result in discipline. They're the ones who are violating the law.
Michael Flynn will be sentenced tomorrow. Unlikely he'll get jail time. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, great to see you. Well, as we've noted many times, the louder our ruling class huffs and puffs about Russia, the greater the threat we face from China. But China, the fascist ethno-state that it is really the object of great love from our ruling class. Here's the latest example. McKinsey & Company, one of America's premier consulting firms, whatever that is. If you know what a consulting firm does, call me. But they're powerful and they make a lot of money. A recent New York Times piece notes that McKinsey advises 22 of China's largest state-owned companies. McKinsey's top partner is based in Hong Kong. And get this, just this year, McKinsey held a huge corporate retreat just miles away from a Chinese internment camp. That's perfect. Mark Stein is an author and a keen observer of the world. He joins us tonight. I mean, at a certain, can I just point out something no one ever says? China is an ethno-state. I mean, it's right. But you can't move to China. They persecute ethnic minorities. I mean, it's a racial category. That's how they see it. It's inherently racist. How can our top companies, so exquisitely sensitive on the racial question, cozy up to a racist ethno-state? I mean, it's just bewildering to me.
Well, because as you said, they're consultants, and the consultant class is a race apart. Stein Consultants Inc. will be willing to take your retainer to consult with you on what consultants do, Tucker. In this
I would pay you.
Case, in this case. We have a geostrategic rival in China. Russia's GDP is about an eighth that of China. Russia is no threat to us. It's a declining power, and it can cause mischief on its way down. China is determined to be the dominant power of the 21st century. And unlike when Germany and Britain and America were competing for that position at the end of the 19th century, where they grew rich on developing products, British products that appeal to British people, German products that appeal to German people, American products that appeal to American people, and then selling them around the world, China has grown rich because Western companies have made China its manufacturing plant, made a totalitarian ethno-state, as you put it, its manufacturing plant. There is no precedent for this in human history, and the likelihood of it ending well for the West is pretty remote. That's why we're talking about Russia, which doesn't matter in the least, and not talking about China, which does.
It's just so funny. The same people who lecture us for being immoral are in business with China. It's unbelievable. Mark Stein, we will see you later in the show, thankfully.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Whether it's Michael Bloomberg or Fidel Castro, authoritarians always want to disarm the people they rule. They have to, in fact, in order to rule in the manner they want. We'll investigate that phenomenon next. Well, no country in the Western Hemisphere has failed more completely in more ways than Venezuela, sadly. It has a lot going for it. It had a huge middle class. It has, of course, the world's largest proven oil reserves. Today, it can't even feed itself. There's no toilet paper some days in Caracas. They're eating zoo animals. What happened? Well, you know what happened. They implemented socialism, and there were obvious and predictable and disastrous consequences. But that's not the whole story of what happened there. 6 years ago, the government of Venezuela passed a gun ban specifically designed to disarm the public. It, of course, did not make people safer. Venezuela is one of the highest murder rates in the world. That wasn't the point of it. The point was to make the people powerless, and it definitely did that. As one terrified Venezuelan put it, quote, "People never would have believed they needed to defend themselves against the government." But of course, they did. In the past 2 years, almost 200 protesters, pro-democracy protesters, have been murdered by the security forces of dictator Nicolas Maduro. The government still has guns, of course. Authoritarians aren't stupid. They never give up their guns. That's rule one. Well, that principle applies just as well to the United States as it does to failing socialist states. In New Jersey, ordinary citizens can go to prison for possessing gun magazines that hold too many rounds. But lawmakers there just changed the law to ensure it doesn't apply to police. They know larger magazines can be helpful for defense. That's why their bodyguards still have them. Regular citizens, though, have to fend for themselves. Bernie Kerik is a former NYPD commissioner, and he joins us tonight. Bernie, thanks very much for coming on. So there are two parts to the story. The first part is the state of New Jersey, for a time, made it a crime for its own officers off-duty, included off-duty, to have magazines that I think hold more than 10 rounds. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, honestly, Tucker, it was worse than that. Basically, they did it for the entire state of New Jersey. 10-round capacity or less only. Anything above that is a crime.
Yes.
They did it for the whole state. When they did that, and basically, it was a cunning way to attack the legal gun owners because you have 8 million handguns in New Jersey. You have probably another 2 million assault weapons, not assault weapons, but semi-automatic weapons, rifles. They have, capacities of more than 10 rounds, and the government took that power away, which means you have to destroy the magazines, or you have to alter them, and most of them can't be altered. So you make those guns useless. When they did this, they also added off-duty police officers, which is completely bizarre, and it's another assault on the Second Amendment. But more importantly, you have off-duty cops that many of them carry their on-duty weapon off-duty.
Of course.
If it's a 9mm, it has 12 rounds in a magazine, or 13 or 14, it now becomes illegal. So God forbid that cop off-duty gets involved in a shooting, and he's held criminally liable. He could be held civilly liable. It's a major, major problem. It's dangerous.
So I want to go back to something you just said a second ago, because it gets to the heart of what makes me nervous about this whole conversation and why I'm starting to suspect the other side is arguing in bad faith. If you're worried about gun violence, and I think everybody is, including me for sure, you go after the small number of people who are committing it, who are criminals and crazy people. You wouldn't intentionally target legal gun owners who are likely to be law-abiding and, in fact, statistically are law-abiding. So why go after them? What's that about?
That's about taking the guns. That's about taking guns. That's the only thing I can think of. These are legal, law-abiding citizens that have been vetted, that have been background checked, that have all the stuff they need to purchase the weapons. Well, the governor decided we're going to take every magazine in excess of 10 rounds. And basically what that does, that's a lot of magazines.
But why would you, so your goal, if that's your plan, is to disarm legal gun owners, to take the resources from stop and frisk, trying to find people who shouldn't have guns who possess them, criminals, and go to legal gun owners, it's not really about reducing the crime rate, is it?
No, absolutely not, because, listen, the bad guys don't care about your gun law. They don't give a damn about that gun law, and they're going to have magazines that have double the capacity. It doesn't make any difference to them. It's not going to have any impact on reducing crime. So I don't know what the purpose was, but I do know right now, even as of now, and this broke on Thursday or Friday, when the Bergen County prosecutor put out a memo to the cops saying, be careful because of this rule, of this law. Even today, as we speak, they've revised, there's a revision to the law, but the governor hasn't signed it. So you still have cops in the state of New Jersey right now, off duty, If they're carrying a magazine in excess of 10 rounds, they are violating New Jersey state law. It's completely insane.
It tells you a lot about where they're coming from. Bernard Carrick, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Teacher's lost his job for refusing to submit to the pronoun police. Literally lost his job. He joins us next to tell us what happened. It's almost impossible to fire a public school teacher for incompetence. Go ahead and try and you'll find out. But it turns out it's very easy to get one fired for thought crimes. Until recently, Peter Vlaming taught at a high school in West Point, Virginia, but he was recently fired. Why? Because he refused to use male pronouns to refer to a biologically female student. He didn't use female pronouns. Instead, he just used the student's name, avoiding pronouns entirely. For that, he lost his job. Peter Vlaming joins us along with his attorney, Sean Boyles. Thank you both very much for coming on. So, Peter, the first question I think in most people's minds is going to be, did you in some way insult the student? Were you cruel to the student? Was there something untoward that you said to the student?
Not at all. Not at all. I love and respect all of my students, including the student in question. And I did everything I could to accommodate the student's new identity.
Yes.
I used the new name. I avoided feminine pronouns.
Yes.
But male pronouns were a bridge too far. But I did everything in my power to accommodate and show respect towards this student and this student's choices.
So you never attacked the student or said, you know, I disagree with what you're doing, or made the student, belittle the student or anything like that?
Not at all. And it's not my place as a public school teacher to give my view on that subject. I'm a French teacher. I teach French.
Interesting. Hey, Sean, have you ever seen a case like this? A teacher fired for not saying something?
No, Tucker, to our understanding, this is the first time in the country. And we should make clear, Tucker, that all we're asking for is that tolerance be a two-way street here. Pete respected this student. All he's asked for, all he still asks for, is that respect be extended to him and to his rights. Right. This is a case of compelled speech, really. Pete was actually fired for what he would not say.
Right. So what's so interesting is, Peter, and I'm taking what you're saying on faith, but we've called around and everyone we've talked to confirms your account. You didn't attack the student. You used a female name, the name of this student. And so apparently the student complained or someone complained to the school. What did they say to you and what was your response?
Well, I was actually using the new name. The student is biologically female, and I was using...
I'm sorry, I inverted it. That's right.
Right.
But you used the preferred name of the student. You used the name the student wanted to be called. Right.
Correct. And then when the school administration understood that I wasn't willing to pronounce male pronouns when referring to the students, I was told that I had to use male pronouns even when students weren't present. Such as if you were my colleague and I'm speaking to you about the student. Let's say I'm praising the student about, hey, you know this student, she did great on a test. Well, I could be denounced and lose my job. And I couldn't agree to that. I couldn't agree to that kind of ultimatum.
Did at any point the question of biology arise? Could you stand on science and say, look, I'm not attacking this person. I'm using the name this person wants me to use, but I can't deny biology. We teach it here at the school. Did you try that?
I reiterated my respect for the student and for the student's choices, but that male pronouns were a bridge too far.
Tucker, we should point out that the school actually took a position contrary to biology.
Yes.
Peter was given an ultimatum by the superintendent that he should treat this student like every other male student, or he would be fired. And that would include using male pronouns. That's, of course,
I've never seen anything like this. And I wish we had more time, but very quickly, Peter, can you tell me, is it as hard as the rest of us think it is to get a public school teacher fired for incompetence?
Good question. It wasn't my case, obviously.
Yeah, I know.
I have a good record. I had a good record at my high school. I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed that school district. So this has nothing to do with incompetence. This has to do with not adopting a very specific ideology about human nature.
Right, of course. I mean, if you should have just been incompetent, you'd still be teaching there, like a lot of other incompetents, I'm sure. Peter Sean, thank you very much. This is a really sad and yet important story, and I'm grateful that you came and told it to us.
Thank you, Tucker.
Pleasure.
Thanks. Democrats gearing up for 2020. They're also upping their attacks based on ethnicity. Kind of hard to believe that's happening in our country, but it is. Mark Stein will unpack it for us after the break. Well, the Democratic primary race is about to begin. Increasingly, that party has divided the world into two groups. It's the Sneetches party, really, the people who look in a way that makes them virtuous and other people who look in a way that makes them sinful. Ironically, though, and this is truly hilarious, a new poll of Iowa Democrats find that their three favorite candidates are all the dreaded white men. Joe Biden leads that race with 31%, followed by Bernie Sanders, and Beto O'Rourke of Texas is in third place. How are the other contenders faring? Kristen Fisher has been following it. She's, of course, a Fox Washington correspondent. She joins us tonight. Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Tucker. Yeah, we're not even out of 2018. We're already talking about 2020, but I guess that's the world we live in,
yes.
Right? That's the world. So keep in mind, this is a poll for a caucus that's still 14 months away, but it does give us a taste of what the Democratic field might look like. And at the top of the list, former Vice President Joe Biden. Now, Biden hasn't even announced that if he's running, but he said that he plans to make a decision in the next 2 months. And just 2 weeks ago, he called himself the most qualified person in the country to be president. Bernie Sanders also hasn't announced if he's running. He came in second. So it shows you that, at least right now, Iowa Democrats seem to favor these familiar faces with a lot of political experience. But then there's Beto O'Rourke, the young Democrat from Texas who narrowly lost that Senate seat to the incumbent, Ted Cruz. O'Rourke finished third in this poll, beating out far more seasoned candidates like Senators Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker, Michael Bloomberg, and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Now, she's made headlines in recent days for admitting she's worried that those top three candidates are all white men. She wants more diversity among the top potential candidates heading into 2020. But what seems to matter most to these Iowa Democrats is experience. 49% say it'll take a seasoned politician, not a newcomer, to win. But remember, President Trump, he said that it would be a dream to run against Biden in 2020. Tucker, I think that President Trump would like to run against almost anyone on that list.
I love that Gillibrand is concerned. So great. Kristen Fisher, thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Elizabeth Warren is not the only one who's very concerned about the diversity of the lineup. And MSNBC's Joy Reid says having the wrong sex and skin color is a disqualifier, potentially. Watch this.
They can't run two white guys. I mean, the idea that you have Joe Biden talking to Beto O'Rourke and saying maybe they could be a ticket, I personally find it hard to understand how you get the requisite turnout among voters of color if it's a two white male ticket. I mean, women are going to be outraged if there's not a woman on the ticket, and voters of color are going to say, well, then why are we participating?
Oh, the diversity politics cul-de-sac. We have reached it. This is how you know God has a sense of humor, when he makes Joe Biden #1 in the hearts of the diversity party. It's hilarious. Mark Stein. Laugh along.
Yeah, I was.
Sorry, I got someone who I forgot to introduce you.
I know. I loved what Elizabeth Warren said in her speech the other night. She said she told this black audience, "I'm not a person of color, and I haven't lived your life." In fact, she did live their life. She allowed herself to be presented as Harvard Law School's first woman of color for year after year after year. And presumably there's a real woman of color who could have been Harvard Law School's first woman. But that's what's so beautiful about it. I always say, you know, Elizabeth Warren is the whitest white since Frosty the Snowman fell in a vat of whiteout. And if she can be Harvard Law School's first woman of color, Joe Biden is enough of a woman of color by those diversity standards. So Joy Reid needn't worry because Beto O'Rourke is the first Muslima transgender nominee for the Democrat Party, and Joe Biden is the first woman of color. All things are possible.
Well, but is Beto O'Rourke, does he qualify as a white man? Sincerely, I mean, I thought the idea was he was like, yeah, but not really. He's kind of so cutting edge that he's not actually or something.
Yeah, he's adopted a groovy name. Joe Biden could easily change his name to Ahmed Biden and be running as the first Muslim vice president. I mean, if the Elizabeth Warren standard is the diversity standard, this isn't identity politics; it's self-identity politics. That's the beauty of it. And God bless her, I love her for that. Only in America can Elizabeth Warren be the Harvard Law School's first woman of color. The American dream in a nutshell.
All the dreams come true in this country. Mark Stein, great to see you tonight, as always.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
We'll be right back. Oh, the hour is over, like sands through an hourglass. Like all good things, it ends before you think it will. The only upside is that you deeply enjoyed it while it was happening. Speaking only for myself, of course. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m., the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and especially groupthink, which is a direct threat to you and your family and your right to make your own decisions. We'll be back in support of free speech. Good night from Washington. Hannity is next. Sitting in for him tonight, we're proud to report, Judge Jeanine Pirro.